looking at this movie and looking at the realities of 2024 and this election, how worried are you?
I'm deeply concerned. Our organization took on this initiative because we thought that this needed to be a conversation that our nation was having in a much bigger way. And doing this exercise was a way to tease out some of the vulnerabilities that exist in our democracy and also to start a larger conversation about this issue of rising extremism in the United States. There are those in the administration that are equally concerned with this issue, but it's also one of many issues that elected officials and administration officials are dealing with. So, what we really need is for elected officials and for administration officials to be held accountable by the public, for this conversation to happen in a big way so that it isn't just one civil service organization providing resources, but there really is a national conversation about this threat.
Well, I mean, I think that we wouldn't have done this if we weren't concerned, if we didn't think that this was not a one and done on January 6th, that this is a continuing dialogue that many people on the far right, especially organizations like the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, the Three Percenters, who've been around a long time, who now have elevated their position politically. If we thought they dissipated and there's no more appetite, that's not the reality. And so we all have to prepare to defend our democracy, whether it is the local election official who's going to be attacked if they come up with the wrong result, all the way to the White House.
And look at where we are right now. About 3 weeks ago, polling said a fourth of Americans think that the FBI actually incited January 6th. You have 171 election deniers in the House, a third of the overall members of Congress. So this isn't some like idle, oh, this could happen. This is happening. This is happening where people are not only denying what happened last January 6th, when the third highest House member, Stefanik, says, well, we'll see if it's a valid election or not. We all should be concerned about where we are, not just January 6th, 2021, but where we are today.
But adding to that, who also calls the January 6th defendants hostages. So that message is being sent and resonating to these groups to tell them we're still with you. North Dakota had an incident in the early 80s where the Posse Comitatus, very high profile leader of the posse, ended up basically killing a U.S. Marshal. It was highly publicized, books being written about it. Those groups were widely condemned, that everyone in public life said, no, that's not who we are. We may have disagreements. That's not happening. It's not happening where now we are inviting this element to the political discourse and legitimizing this element in a way I haven't seen in my lifetime.
Yeah, no, you can go back. Certainly things have been part of sort of the ethos. 2022, or no, go back to 30 years ago, Ruby Ridge in Idaho. Mm-hmm. Go back to Branch Davidians. Mm-hmm. About 30 years ago. This has always been an extreme element, has always been part of it. But as Heidi says, never before have you turned around and said, literally insurrectionists, the third highest member of the House of Representatives in the United States calls them hostages. We've allowed these fictions to actually get into the mainstream, and it's dangerous. It's dangerous for what could happen, and it's dangerous for what is happening. When you had literally last time, there were 50 people running for governor across the country that denied the results of the last election. Look, I've been in elections where I was disappointed in the outcome, didn't have a lot of respect for my opponent, but at the end of the day, you say, that's what happens, and there's something more important. And that's, as we say, this experiment in representative democracy, which is being tested right now.
Well, I think when the three retired U.S. generals first did the op-ed in the Washington Post, what they said was, we love democracy, we love America. But January 6th was an inflection point. Are we going to pay attention to it? Our military background tells us we must. The way to look at this and be prepared for the next one is we wargame it out. And I thought those words were unbelievably intelligent. I listened to the military, what they had to say, And I said to myself, I love democracy. I love America. And when John Steinberg, my producing partner on The Old Man, said, I think there's an opportunity for this not just to be covered in a 60 Minutes piece, but it's an opportunity to really, really do something that's bigger, a larger warning, and really document the war game that's going to be made. And I said, I can't wait. Let's jump in, because that's what I'm left with, Dominic. I'm left with, I love democracy, I love America, and that's what I think this is about.
Question. It was very important for us to lean into the verisimilitude, both for the film, but also for the experience of the role players. Now, no one has mentioned that this event actually took place on January 6th. So when folks walked in from the street, there already was a kind of electricity and a kind of emotion that was in the air before we even sat down to begin this war game. But you asked about social media. Social media was the main weapon of choice for the red cell. And one of the critiques of the administration, of the Hotham administration, was they didn't pay enough attention to what they call the information space. But as for us as filmmakers, absolutely, it had to feel real. We didn't call it Twitter, we didn't call it X. It was our own sort of brand of social media, but it needed to feel like an assault, right? And at one point in the movie, there's what we call a tweet storm, right? As the president is at this sort of moment of maximum, heat in terms of what is the right choice, right? And the noise from social media is real.
What brought this exercise so much credibility is Vet Voice and Janessa and her colleagues who are former military generals and other well-connected people in the political world. They recruited the cast. They brought people to this exercise who have held office, the highest political office in the United States, governors, senators, former four-star generals. They cast those roles because those people have that experience to play the president, to play his advisors. And we were there to capture that in all its authenticity. So as documentary filmmakers, we do often exercise some discretion over cast. In this case, we didn't choose the role players. We didn't know if they could act, but they were really playing themselves, and that's what makes this film so extraordinary. They're improvising their characters in the moment. We didn't know what course they would go in making these decisions, whether the United States would descend into chaos and anarchy, or whether President Bullock, played by Governor Bullock, playing President Hotham.
Now that is a classic Freudian slip.
There we go. See, even
If you want to promote your film, I get it.
even I've gotten confused. We actually have President Hotham buttons on, but I think that what was so exciting about this is Janessa and her team and the role players gave us a ringside seat in the White House Situation Room to see the president manage this crisis. And for me, as someone who's wrestling with what our political future is, where are we headed as a country, this is a way of confronting that question. And I think that's what this film does. It invites an audience into this conversation about what are these risks. And these are people with real experience who are saying we should take this threat seriously.
Look, I think when President Biden goes and gives speeches about the threat to democracy, he sees this. The administration understands that we can disagree and differ on policy issues, but preservation of the norms of democracy are essential. So, no, I haven't reached out and said, might be good film promotion, but look, you got to see this film. But I think the notion that this is just 4 different administrations were involved in this, Democrats and Republicans. Like, this isn't a January 6th retrospective. This is capturing the concerns and the real concerns that are out there now.
Well, the military is a reflection of our society. So extremist elements that we're seeing across our society are equally reflected in the military. And unfortunately, this topic has become so politicized that for the Department of Defense to really take this seriously and implement some of the screening measures, even that has become controversial. There have been House panels that have descended into chaos because There are members who think that to bring this up is disrespectful to the troops. I believe that if you love something, you make it stronger, you make it better. And so investigating folks who are participating in this activity, making sure that they're not joining in the first place, and making sure that our veterans are not being targeted for recruitment is of utmost priority. But I also want to say to the President Biden question, the president has articulated his concerns about this, but one of the goals, I hope, of this film is to have a conversation in living rooms across the country, because this type of insurrection or chaos only occurs when everyday people decide to take those actions and participate in those activities. So it isn't just about what the President of the United States does or someone in uniform, but somebody who's in their living room, who's in a chat room, listening to this type of extremist ideology, buying into it, and deciding that it makes sense to take up arms against the United States of America. And that is what concerns me the most.
But if you go back and take a look at kind of the continuation of this issue, Janet Napolitano, when she was the head of Homeland Security, actually issued a report about this challenge of maintaining kind of an ideological kind of neutrality within the military, and that many Iraqi and Afghani war vets were coming home radicalized. And so everybody wants to pinpoint this on the former President Trump, but this was ripe ground for a long, long time. And so I think that the worst enemy for us in meeting this challenge is denial. And where we get into challenges is when people equate having this discussion with curtailing conservative thought. There is a difference between insurrectionist thought and conservative thought, and that line is often blurred in the political discourse. And so recently in Minot at the air base, there was an order issued saying, if you're going to attend a political rally, please beware of what our standards are in the military. And it ignited a firestorm of dialogue. And so is that a bad thing? I think not. I think the dialogue needs to be there, and we need to have these tough conversations, but they need to be reasoned. And they can't be just everybody picking a side and then shouting across the divide. It's got to be a common purpose to defend our democracy, but also have that space for everybody's political thought to be represented, as long as it's not insurrectionist.